My name is Alara. For 24 years, I've lived in Havenwood, a town nestled in a valley that always smells of pine needles after a summer rain. My life has been a quiet one, painted in the muted tones of responsibility. By day, I work at the Havenwood Community Credit Union, where the air is thick with the scent of sterilized cash and the gentle hum of computer fans. By night, 4 times a week, I find refuge in the hallowed quiet of the Gilded Page, our town's last independent bookstore, a place that smells of aging paper and forgotten stories. I used to paint. My canvases were filled with the fiery sunsets over Miller's Ridge and the deep, misty greens of the forest floor. But lately, the brushes have gathered dust. My time, like my energy, has been a finite resource, and it was being spent elsewhere. The shift began on a Sunday evening in late spring. The scent of my mother's roast chicken, usually a comfort, hung heavy in the air. My father, Richard, cleared his throat, the sound echoing in the sudden silence. He slid a single, pristine sheet of paper across the polished oak of the dining table. It wasn't a death sentence, not exactly, but it felt like the closing of a book I had once loved. "Alara," he began, his voice calm and measured, the one he used for serious matters. "Your mother, and I feel it's time you took a more significant step into adulthood. We've drawn up a household contribution agreement." I picked up the paper. The words were formal, typed in a neat Times New Roman font. My name was at the top. Below it, an itemized list that made my breath catch. Contribution for lodging, $650. Shared utilities, electric, water, gas, $150. Household provisioning, groceries, supplies, $150. Total monthly contribution, $950. My mother, Marianne, reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. Her touch was soft, her nails perfectly manicured. "Think of it as an investment in yourself, darling," she said, her voice a gentle melody. "It's about building character. Financial discipline. It's how you learn to stand on your own 2 feet." My own 2 feet, which already felt worn down from shuttling between the bank and the bookstore, ached in protest. I glanced across the room. My younger brother, Leo, was lounging on the sofa, scrolling through his phone, a half-eaten bowl of ice cream melting on the end table beside him. He was a picture of serene detachment. He had just returned from a 3-week exploratory trip to the coast to find his creative center. He had found, as far as I could tell, a great tan and a portfolio of beautifully filtered photographs of waves. "And Leo?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The question felt fragile, breakable. "Leo's path is different," my father stated, his tone leaving no room for debate. "He's building a portfolio, making connections. It's an unconventional career path, and it requires our full support. You have your job, Alara. You have stability. 2 stable jobs that left me with just enough time to sleep and dream of the paintings I no longer had the energy to create." I stared at the agreement, the crisp black ink seeming to mock the exhaustion that had settled deep in my bones. "When does this begin?" I asked, folding the paper with careful, precise movements. "The 1st of next month," Richard said. "That's in 10 days. We trust you'll be prepared." It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. I nodded, my mind already a frantic abacus, calculating the extra shifts I'd need to request at the bookstore, the lunches I'd have to skip, the small joys I'd have to sacrifice. "And sweetie," my mother added, her smile unwavering, "payments are due on the 1st. There will be a small $50 fee for any late payments. Just like in the real world." I excused myself, the roast chicken on my plate untouched. In my room, surrounded by the familiar ghosts of my childhood, I looked at the easel in the corner, shrouded in a dusty sheet. It felt like a monument to a life I was quickly leaving behind. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "Don't forget to do your dishes, honey. We all need to pitch in." I looked out my window and saw Leo's car pulling out of the driveway. He was heading to a friend's house for a bonfire. He'd be home late, and his sticky ice cream bowl would remain on the end table, a silent testament to his different path. The next morning at the credit union, My hands trembled as I counted out a stack of 20s. Ben, my coworker from the next teller window, slid a steaming mug of herbal tea onto my counter. He was a man of few words, but profound observation. "Long night?" he asked, his eyes kind. You could say that. I tried to laugh, but the sound was hollow. I told him about the agreement, the numbers feeling even more absurd when spoken aloud in the sterile, sensible environment of the bank. Ben listened, his expression unchanged. He didn't whistle or exclaim. He just nodded slowly. "That's a heavy load, Alara." "It's about adult responsibility," I said, the phrase tasting like ash. I then mentioned the small, recurring charges I'd noticed on the phone bill. I managed a music streaming service, a subscription to a high-end photo editing app, all under Leo's account. "They say it's an investment in his future." Ben looked at me, his gaze direct. "Is it an investment you agreed to make?" I had no answer. But his question planted a seed. It was a tiny, radical thought that I should have a choice. That evening, I sat at my laptop and opened a new email account, one with a name only I would know. Then I navigated to a high-yield online savings account and began the application. I named the account North Star. It felt right. A fixed point in a dizzying, spinning world. I took a clear photograph of the household contribution agreement and saved it to a secure folder in my new email account. A quiet record. A silent truth. On the first of the month, I placed an envelope with $950 in cash on the dining table before leaving for work. "Good girl," my father said, folding it and putting it in his wallet without looking up from his morning paper. "You're learning." As I was leaving, Leo shuffled into the kitchen. "Hey, Elle," he said, yawning. "Can you spot me $40? I need to get my camera lens cleaned." I looked at him, really looked at him. My brother, the dreamer, the golden child, forever on the verge of a breakthrough that never came, forever subsidized by my reality. A strange calm settled over me. "I'm sorry, Leo," I said, and was surprised by the steadiness in my own voice. "I'm on a very strict budget now." My mother's head snapped up from where she was arranging flowers in a vase. "Alara, don't be petty. Family supports family." A cold, clear thought surfaced in my mind. "You're right, Mom. Family supports family." That night, tucked away in my room, I made a new set of calculations. It would take time. Maybe 2 years. Every extra shift, every skipped luxury, every dollar would go to my North Star. And as if on cue, my phone lit up with a notification from the App Store. A new $19.99 purchase for a pro-level photo filter pack charged to my account. I didn't get angry. In the quiet darkness of my room, I smiled. They wanted to teach me about the real world. Fine. I was a very good student. I would learn my lessons so well, they would never see the final exam coming. 6 months later, the world had shrunk to the space between the credit union, the bookstore, and my bed. The vibrant colors of Havenwood's autumn passed by in a blur outside the windows of my life. My friend Chloe's invitations for hikes and coffees went unanswered, replaced with polite excuses. I sent her a gift for her birthday and worked a double shift to pay for it. The balance in my North Star account grew with excruciating slowness, each deposit a tiny victory in a long, silent war. One evening, I came home to find my father waiting for me in the living room, my rent envelope in his hand. "You're 2 days late, Alara." "The first was on a Sunday, Dad. The bank was closed. I couldn't get the cash until yesterday." He tapped the envelope. "The agreement is the agreement. Life doesn't make exceptions for bank holidays. That will be an extra $50. I didn't argue. I had learned early on that logic and fairness were not part of this curriculum. Arguing only led to long, circular lectures about my attitude. I simply went to my room, retrieved the extra $50 from my tip jar, and handed it to him. I documented the transaction in a small, password-protected spreadsheet on my laptop. It was becoming my secret history, a meticulous record of every contribution, every fee, every injustice. Later that night, I heard my mother's soft voice drifting up the stairs. An old childhood habit of listening on the landing resurfaced, now a necessary tool for survival. Don't you worry about finding a job just yet, Leo, honey, she was saying, her tone a soothing balm. Your creative energy is so fragile right now. You need to protect it. Alara's contribution is helping us keep things stable so you have the space to blossom. Leo's response was a low murmur, but I could picture his casual shrug, the same one he gave when I found him using my streaming accounts because he'd forgotten his own password again. The weight in my chest wasn't anger anymore. It was a profound, aching sadness. They weren't just favoring him, they were sacrificing me for the sake of a dream that wasn't even mine. The next morning at the credit union felt particularly bleak. I must have dozed off for a second while waiting for the systems to boot up, because Ben's voice startled me. You look like you're fading away, Alara. He placed his customary cup of chamomile tea on my counter. Just tired, I mumbled, straightening my blouse. Covered a late shift at the store. You can't pour from an empty cup, he said, his voice low and serious. Whatever you're saving for, don't lose yourself getting there. His words stayed with me all day. The numbers on the computer screen blurred together. A text from my mother arrived at 4 p.m. Dinner at 6 sharp. We need to discuss the increase in the electricity bill. I texted back that I had to work, which wasn't a lie. I was scheduled until 9. Family dinner is important, she replied instantly. Leo is making his special risotto. Leo's special risotto involved a box, a spice packet, and an entire stick of butter. But I knew this was not about the food. When I finally got home, long after the risotto had been consumed, another envelope was waiting on the hall table. My name was on it in my father's severe handwriting. Electricity usage was high last month, he announced from his armchair. Your share of utilities is now $190, up from $150. My gaze drifted to Leo's corner of the living room, where his new, high-powered laptop and a second monitor glowed brightly. He was editing photos, the machine humming with effort. Is that because I started? Don't, my mother cut in sharply from the kitchen. Your brother needs the proper equipment. It's a professional expense. I bit my tongue and ate a cold bowl of cereal for dinner. That night, sleep wouldn't come. The numbers spun in my head. Contribution, utilities, late fees, Leo's app subscriptions. I pulled out my phone and checked my secret account. $5,814. It felt like a fortune and nothing at all. A text from Chloe lit up the screen. Miss you. Are you okay? I couldn't bring myself to reply. How could I explain this life I was living? The next day, Ben motioned me over to his computer before the doors opened. He had a real estate website pulled up. I'm not trying to be nosy, he said, but my cousin is a realtor. She sends me foreclosure listings. Look at this. He pointed to a small cottage on the other side of town, near the river. It was modest, with a little porch and a yard overgrown with wildflowers. It was a foreclosure, priced far below the market rate. Why are you showing me this, Ben? Because, he said, looking at me with genuine concern, I see you working yourself to the bone. And I think you need a goal. Not just a number in an account, but a picture. Something real to hold on to. I stared at the little blue cottage. It looked like a place where someone could paint again. I don't have enough. I'm nowhere near ready. Maybe not, he agreed. But now you know what you're working for. That evening, I came home to find Leo and a friend in the kitchen, surrounded by empty takeout containers from the Rustic Pizza Company, the expensive wood-fired place downtown. He'd used our shared emergency credit card, the one I paid the bill for. Thanks for dinner, Al, he called out as I walked past. I stopped on the stairs. Leo, we talked about the card. It's for emergencies only. He didn't even look up from his laptop. Mom said it was fine. It's not fine. I can't afford. Can't afford what, Alara? My mother appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on an apron. Don't be so dramatic. Your brother was networking. It's important to build relationships. I went to my room and opened my spreadsheet. I added the pizza charge to the long list. Then I opened the real estate listing Ben had shown me and saved it to my bookmarks. 2 years had felt like a prison sentence. But now, looking at the picture of that little blue cottage, something inside me shifted. Maybe I didn't need 2 years. Maybe I just needed the right moment. The right leverage. My phone buzzed with another notification. A $49.99 charge. Leo had purchased a masterclass from a famous photographer. I added it to the spreadsheet. Every charge, every fee, every casual justification was no longer just an insult. It was fuel. It was another stone in the foundation of the new life I would build, far away from this house of shifting rules and silent sacrifices. My world had become a closed loop of work, eat, and sleep, with every spare dollar funneled into my North Star account. Chloe's calls went to voicemail. My social media profiles lay dormant. I was a ghost in my own life, haunting the teller line and the aisles of the bookstore, visible only to my customers and to Ben, who had taken to leaving protein bars on my counter. "You're skipping meals again," he'd say, and it wasn't a question. One evening, I was stacking books in the biography section when a familiar voice called my name. It was Celia Vance, the realtor, a friend of my mother's who had always treated me with a warmth that felt separate from my family's complicated dynamics. "Alara, goodness," she said, her smile crinkling the corners of her eyes. "I feel like I haven't seen you in ages. Your mother says you're working hard, learning all about financial responsibility." I managed a weak smile. "That's one way to put it." "You look exhausted," she said, her expression softening into one of concern. "Let me buy you a cup of tea when your shift is over." My treat. I hesitated, the pull of my bed almost overwhelming. But the genuine kindness in her eyes was something I hadn't realized how much I'd missed. "Okay, Celia. Just for a little while." We sat in a booth at the 24-hour diner next door, the air smelling of coffee and fried onions. Celia sipped her chamomile tea, studying me over the rim of her mug. "Your mother is very proud of you," she said carefully. "She tells everyone at her book club how you're contributing to the household, paying your own way." I nearly choked on my water. "Is that what she's calling it?" "She mentions you're paying a regular amount, like rent," Celia continued, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Which is interesting." "Interesting how?" She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Well, I was helping your parents look at refinancing their mortgage last month, just to see if they could get a better rate. A friendly consultation, you know." She paused, swirling the tea in her cup. "They're 6 months behind on their payments, Alara. The bank has sent them 2 preliminary notices." The noisy diner suddenly went silent. The clatter of plates, the low murmur of conversations, it all faded away. 6 months. 6 months of my $950 contributions. 6 months of my double shifts and skipped meals. 6 months of lectures about responsibility, all while they were what? Using my money to desperately, and unsuccessfully, plug a hole in a sinking ship. "I probably shouldn't have said anything," Celia said quickly, seeing the shock on my face. "No," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I'm glad you did." She looked at me, a long, appraising look. "Listen to me, Alara. I've been in this business for 25 years. I've seen families go through every kind of financial stress imaginable. And I've also seen people find ways out. Smart ways." My heart started to beat a little faster. "What do you mean?" "There are ways to protect yourself. Ways to make purchases, significant ones, without the whole world knowing your business. Through trusts or LLCs. It's all perfectly legal. You just have to be quiet and careful." She was talking about the cottage. The little blue cottage with the wildflower garden. It wasn't just a dream. She was telling me it could be a plan. She scribbled on a napkin and pushed it across the table. "First thing you need is a post office box. A mailing address that has nothing to do with your parents' house. It's the first step to financial privacy." I folded the napkin and put it in my pocket just as my phone lit up. A text from my mother. "Where are you? Leo's car is making a funny noise, and he needs a ride home from Ashley's party." "I have to go," I said, standing up. Celia put a hand on my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "Alara, whatever you decide to do, be smart. And be brave." I drove home, my mind reeling. When I walked in, I found Leo on the sofa, watching a movie. His car was in the driveway. It had never left. It was another test. Another casual manipulation to keep me on a leash. "You're home late," my father called out from his study. The words were automatic now, a tired refrain. I walked past his door without a word and went to my room. My phone buzzed again. It was Chloe. Just checking in. I let the call go to voicemail. The next morning, I found Ben in the break room before we opened. I showed him the napkin from Celia. "She told me the truth," I said, and the whole story of the mortgage, the late payments, the lies, came tumbling out. He listened patiently, his teacup warming his hands. When I was done, he said simply, "So they weren't teaching you. They were using you." "They've always been using me," I whispered, the admission painful and liberating at the same time. I just didn't want to see it. That afternoon, on my lunch break, I went to the post office and opened a P.O. box. That evening, I sat at my laptop and began to research. Limited liability companies. Anonymous real estate purchases. Property law. Each article I read, each legal term I deciphered, felt like another stone being laid on a new path, a path leading away from the house I'd grown up in. There was a soft knock on my door. It was my mother. "Alara, sweetie, the Wi-Fi is acting sluggish. Leo says it's probably the router. Can you take a look?" "I'm busy, Mom," I called back, minimizing the legal website on my screen. "But we need it," she insisted, her voice wheedling. "You're the one who's so good with all this tech stuff." I closed my laptop. A profound calm washed over me. I looked at the picture of the blue cottage, still open in a browser tab. They needed me. They had built their entire, precarious life on the foundation of my competence, my responsibility, my willingness to fix things. My phone lit up. An alert from the credit card company. Bailey had just bought a new video game. I smiled in the darkness. The ghost of the dutiful daughter was fading, replaced by someone stronger, someone colder. My father's voice drifted up from downstairs. "Bailey, don't worry about the internet bill. Your sister has it covered." I added another entry to my spreadsheet. Another brick in the wall. Another step toward the day when they'd learn what family helps family really means. The house listing Ben had shown me was still open, still waiting, still possible. I opened Celia's contact and started typing about that P.O. box. The key to P.O. Box 734 felt solid and real in my hand. I sat across from Celia in her sunlit office, the scent of fresh paint and new beginnings in the air. She slid a thin folder across her polished desk. "North Star Holdings, LLC," she read aloud. "It's simple, legally sound, and completely anonymous. You are the sole member, but your name doesn't appear on the public formation documents. It's all been filed." She pushed a pen towards me. "Sign here." My hand was steady as I signed my name, Alara Vance, on the internal operating agreement. It felt like the most honest signature I had ever written. 2 months of hushed phone calls, late-night research, and careful planning had brought me to this moment. "The cottage you liked is still on the market," Celia said, her fingers dancing across her keyboard. "The bank is highly motivated to get it off their books. With a cash offer from a holding company, we could likely close in less than 30 days. I thought of my North Star account, which had grown healthier than I had ever imagined. The grueling hours, the social isolation, it had all been for this. To be able to nod at Celia and say, "Let's make an offer." Back at home, the atmosphere was thick with a tension I was now detached from. There was a note on my pillow, not my door. A softer, more manipulative touch from my mother. "Rent is 2 days late. Your father is very concerned about your finances. Let's talk. Love, Mom." I went to my father's study. He sat behind his imposing desk, a caricature of patriarchal authority. "Your hours at the bookstore were cut," he asked, peering over his reading glasses. It was the story I'd given them for my new, leaner budget. "Yes," I lied, feeling nothing. "They hired a new full-time manager." "That's a shame," he said, finally meeting my gaze. "But the agreement stands. Rent is due, plus the late fee. The full amount." I pulled an envelope from my bag. It contained half the amount. This is what I have right now. I'll have the rest when I get paid from the bank on Friday. Unacceptable. He pushed the envelope back toward me. It slid to a stop inches from my hand. The full amount, Alara. By tomorrow morning. Or you'll have to reconsider your living arrangements. The threat, once terrifying, was now a key unlocking my cage. 2 years ago, I would have cried, begged, promised to work harder. Now, I felt a strange sense of relief. He had just given me the permission I needed. I understand, I said, my voice even. That night, I began to pack. Not with frantic haste, but with the calm, methodical purpose of a librarian archiving a collection. I labeled each box books, kitchen, art supplies, and, over the next few days, I moved them into the trunk of my car during my lunch breaks. Ben helped me with my easel and a box of canvases, loading them into the back of his truck one afternoon. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, his voice low. "They didn't give me a choice," I replied, looking at my reflection in the car window. I looked tired, but I also looked free. Actually, I corrected myself. They gave me all the choices in the world. And I'm finally making the right one for me. At dinner that week, 2 days after the deadline had passed, my father cleared his throat. 2 days, Alara. I gave you a warning. I didn't reach for my wallet. Instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out a single, folded piece of paper. I slid it across the table, a perfect echo of his gesture so many months ago. It was my formal, typed 30-day notice to vacate the premises. The silence that followed was absolute. My mother's fork clattered onto her plate. Leo, for the first time in memory, looked up from his phone, his mouth slightly agape. "What is this?" my father demanded, his face flushing a deep, mottled red. "It's exactly what it looks like," I said, standing from the table. "I'm moving out." "You can't just," my mother began, her voice trembling. "Actually, I can," I said. I walked to the front door, then paused and turned back. "Oh, and Leo? I've canceled the internet plan that was in my name. The service ends tomorrow. You'll have to set up your own account." My father ripped the notice in half. "If you walk out that door, don't even think about coming back." I smiled. A real, genuine smile that reached my eyes. "I won't." I spent that night at Chloe's apartment, sleeping on her sofa. Celia had called earlier. The bank had accepted my all-cash offer on the cottage. The closing was set for the end of the month. Everything was falling into place. The next morning, my phone began to buzz incessantly. "My mother, this is a childish tantrum, Alara. You're tearing this family apart." "My father, you have a responsibility to this family. Bailey needs the internet for his work." "Leo, seriously? The Wi-Fi is down. Mom and Dad are freaking out." "Where are you?" I blocked their numbers, one by one. At the credit union, Ben watched me do it. "How does it feel?" he asked. I took a deep breath, the first one that didn't feel constricted in years. "It feels like I can finally breathe." The next 30 days were a strange limbo. I lived out of a suitcase at Chloe's, ferrying the last of my things from my car to a small storage unit. The closing on my cottage went through without a hitch. The day I got the keys, I walked through the empty, sun-dusted rooms and cried. Not from sadness, but from a relief so profound it felt like a physical weight lifting from my shoulders. I sat on the floor of my new, empty living room and unblocked my parents' numbers, curious. There were dozens of missed calls and texts. The latest one was from my father. The mortgage company called. "They're escalating the foreclosure process." "I don't understand. Where has your money been going?" I opened my laptop and pulled up the spreadsheet, the one that documented 2 years of my life. 2 years of their quiet, relentless financial abuse. I attached it to an email, along with the photo of the original agreement and a record of the late mortgage payments from the county clerk's website, which Celia had shown me how to find. I addressed it to my father's work email, my mother's personal account, and Leo's photography-branded address. The subject line was simple, regarding my adult responsibilities. I hit send. Then I turned off my phone, walked out onto my little porch, and watched the sun set over the river. Somewhere across town, a family was about to learn a lesson they had never intended to teach. Sometimes, the most important step in standing on your own 2 feet is walking away from the people who are trying to trip you. The keys to the little blue cottage felt like a talisman in my palm. I spent the first week in a state of blissful industry, painting the walls a warm, buttery yellow and scrubbing the wide plank floors until they shone. The silence was the most beautiful part. No tense dinners, no passive-aggressive notes, no late-night arguments drifting up from downstairs. Just the gentle sigh of the wind in the tall pines outside my window. "You did it," Celia said, standing in the doorway of what would soon be my art studio. She held a bottle of champagne. "How does it feel?" Before I could answer, my phone, which I had cautiously turned back on, buzzed with a text from Chloe. "Your mom just called me, sobbing. Said she went into your old room and it was completely empty. What should I tell her?" I showed the message to Celia. She smiled wryly. And so it begins. The fallout. The messages from my family started as a trickle, then became a flood. My mothers were pleading, "Alara, where are you? We need to talk. This isn't like you." My fathers were demanding, "The internet company says the account is closed. You are legally a resident here. You can't just abandon your responsibilities." I was arranging thrift store books on a newly built shelf when Ben arrived with a housewarming pizza. "Your father came into the credit union today," he said, setting the box on my small kitchen table. "He was asking if I knew which branch you'd transferred to." I told him I wasn't at liberty to say. "How did he look?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. "Scared," Ben said, handing me a paper plate. Like a man who just realized the foundation of his house was gone. My phone rang. It was Leo. I let it go to voicemail. A moment later, a new notification appeared. I listened to it on speaker. Hey, El." His voice was hesitant, laced with an unfamiliar anxiety. "Look, I don't know what's going on, but Dad is being super weird about money and the Wi-Fi is still down. Can you just call me? We need to fix this." I laughed, a real, unburdened laugh. "Fix this? He thinks this is something to be fixed." Just then, my new doorbell chimed. Through the peephole, I saw Chloe shifting nervously on my porch. I opened the door. Her eyes were wide with concern. "Your mom is beside herself. Your dad is talking about filing a missing persons report." "What on earth happened, Alara?" She stepped inside and her jaw dropped as she took in my small, peaceful home. "You bought a house?" "I did," I said. And for the first time, I told a friend the whole story. Not the clipped, evasive version, but the full, painful truth. I pulled up the spreadsheet on my laptop and showed her the numbers, the dates, the late fees. Chloe sank onto my second-hand sofa. "I knew they were charging you rent," she whispered, "but this is something else entirely." "Alara, I'm so sorry." "You tried to warn me," I said, remembering her unanswered texts. I just wasn't ready to hear it. Another text lit up my phone. It was my father. "The bank just called about the email you sent." "What is this spreadsheet? These numbers can't be right." They were figuring it out. The precarious system they had built, the one that relied on my silence and compliance, was starting to crumble under the weight of simple arithmetic. Celia called a few minutes after Chloe left. "What other thing?" Ben asked, looking between us. "Later," I said as another call from Bailey lit up my phone. Naomi stood to leave. "They're not going to stop, you know. They'll keep coming until they get answers." I know, I walked her to the door, but for the first time, I don't have to give them any. After everyone left, I sat in my empty dining room reading the mounting messages. "The power company needs updating. Bailey's account is overdrawn. We're your family. You can't just disappear." I opened my laptop and logged into my bank account. 2 years of transactions, all meticulously documented. 2 years of their financial abuse, recorded in black and white. My phone rang again. My mother. This time I answered. "Alara, where are you?" she demanded, her voice tight with panic. "I'm safe," I replied calmly. "I'm independent. Everything you said you wanted me to be. This isn't a joke, Alara. Your brother." My brother, I cut in, my voice still gentle but now edged with steel, needs to grow up. And frankly, so do you and Dad. We are your parents. We were trying to teach you. No, I said, and the truth of it settled in my soul. You were my landlords. And I found better accommodations. I hung up the phone. An email from Celia arrived almost immediately. The bank has accepted North Star's offer to purchase the mortgage note. It's done. The paperwork is being drawn up. I smiled. They thought losing their personal ATM was the crisis. They had no idea the real lesson was about to begin. My phone lit up one last time. A text from Leo. This isn't fair. You're ruining everything for us. I looked around my beautiful, quiet cottage, the air filled with the scent of lemon oil and the promise of peace. No invoices on the table. No guilt in the air. No parasitic brother draining my accounts. No, Leo, I whispered to the empty room. I'm finally fixing everything for me. I opened Celia's email and began to review the documents that would make North Star Holdings the official holder of my parents' mortgage. The game wasn't over. But I had just changed all the rules. The official notice from the bank arrived at my parents' house on a crisp Tuesday. It informed them that their mortgage had been sold and would now be serviced by a private entity, North Star Holdings, LLC. I knew the moment they read it because Celia texted me. Your mother just called me frantic. She wants to know who North Star is. The dots are connecting. Are you sure you want to do this? Ben asked me later that week over coffee. He'd become my quiet confidant, a steady presence in the storm. Becoming their lender, that's a whole new level. They haven't learned anything, I said, showing him my banking app. 3 more small, desperate charges from Leo had been attempted on my old, now canceled credit card. They still think my resources are theirs to take. This isn't about punishment, Ben. It's about creating a boundary so solid they can never cross it again. My phone buzzed. It was Chloe. Your mom is telling everyone in her book club that you abandoned them in their time of need and left them in financial ruin. I texted back a single line. Feel free to forward her the email I sent. A few minutes later, Chloe replied. Done. Total silence on the group chat. I think you broke them. I looked at Ben and nodded. It's time. That evening, I prepared the final piece of my strategy. It was a simple manila envelope. Inside, I placed a copy of the new mortgage agreement with North Star Holdings listed as the lender. I also included a proposed rental agreement for the property, with the monthly rent listed at fair market value, a figure nearly double what I had been paying. At the top, I clipped a simple, handwritten note. This is a lesson in real-world finance. I learned it from you. The doorbell rang as I was sealing the envelope. Through the peephole, I saw Leo. He looked smaller, diminished, his usual easy confidence replaced by a raw desperation. I know you're in there, Alara, he called out, his voice cracking. My debit card was declined at the grocery store. All my accounts are frozen. Mom said you did this. I opened the door, but stood in the entryway, blocking his path. That sounds like a personal financial matter you'll need to resolve, Leo. This isn't funny. He tried to step forward, but I didn't move. Just lend me some cash. Just until I get things sorted out. Until what? I asked, my voice soft. Until you find your creative center? Until your photography takes off? Until Mom and Dad find another way to insulate you from reality. He recoiled as if I'd slapped him. For the first time, he seemed to be truly seeing me, not as a sister or a resource, but as a person who had reached her limit. They're a mess, he said quietly. Dad paces all night. Mom just sits in the dark and cries. They're going to lose the house. Consequences are difficult, aren't they? I said. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Celia. It's official. The transfer is recorded. North Star owns the note. As if on cue, Leo's phone rang. I could hear my mother's frantic, high-pitched voice through the speaker. Mom? What? What do you mean the mortgage was sold? His face went pale. I stepped back inside and gently closed the door, leaving him alone on my porch. Through the window, I watched him pace back and forth, his whole world tilting on its axis in real time. Later that evening, my father called. I answered on speakerphone, with Ben sitting across from me for moral support. "We received a letter," he said, his voice trembling with a rage that didn't quite mask his fear. "From a company. North Star Holdings." "How interesting," I replied, my tone neutral. They're a new mortgage company. And they've sent an eviction notice pending a new rental agreement. At market rate. That sounds like a valuable learning experience, I said, echoing the words he had spoken to me so many times. There was a long silence on the line. Then, his voice dropped to a choked whisper. "Alara, Did I what, Dad?" I asked. "Take control of my finances? Make a smart, long-term investment? Build a secure future for myself? Isn't that everything you wanted to teach me?" The line went dead. Ben stared at me, his expression unreadable. "That was definitive." "No," I corrected him gently. "Definitive is charging your daughter exorbitant rent while your son lives for free. Definitive is imposing late fees to teach a lesson while you fall behind on your own mortgage. What they did was cold. This," I said, gesturing to the phone, "is just clear." My mother texted next. "Please, Alara. We can't lose this house. We're your family." I typed back a single sentence. Family supports family. Remember? I had the manila envelope delivered by a courier the next day. I watched from my security camera feed as my father opened it on his front porch, the papers shaking in his hand as he read them. The texts and calls continued for days. "We need to talk. Please call us." "What did you do?" I silenced my phone and walked through my quiet, sunlit cottage. No guilt. No manipulation. No invoices waiting on the dining room table. I picked up my phone and drafted one final message to the family group chat. "As per the enclosed agreement, rent is due on the 1st of the month. Late fees will apply. Welcome to the real world." Then, for the final time, I blocked their numbers. I opened my laptop and began to draft their first official notice from their new landlord. Sometimes the best lessons aren't taught with anger. They're taught with clarity, with consequences, and with the undeniable reality of a legally binding contract. The pounding on my front door began at 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning. I'd been expecting it. I took a slow sip of my coffee, watching the steam curl into the morning light, and walked to the door. Through the peephole, I could see them, my father, his face a mask of grim fury, my mother, her hands twisting the strap of her purse, and Leo, standing behind them, holding a duffel bag. I opened the door but left the security chain engaged. "Good morning. This has gone on long enough, Alara," my father boomed. "We know it's you. North Star Holdings. Congratulations on your research," I said calmly. My mother pushed forward, her face tear-streaked. "Sweetheart, we need to talk this out. As a family. Things are difficult right now. Leo needs a place to stay, just temporarily." I looked from my mother's pleading face to Leo's duffel bag, then back again. "Oh, you're in need of housing? I suppose the sofa is available. That will be $950 a month. Utilities not included. First and last month's rent due up front." The color drained from my father's face as my words, his own words, echoed back at him. "You can't be serious," Leo sputtered. "Why not?" "It's how the real world works," I said, my voice gentle. "Remember?" My mother's tears began to flow in earnest, the familiar tactic that had worked for so many years. "We're your family, Alara. How can you do this to us?" "Family?" I said, pulling out my phone. "That's interesting. I have a whole file of notes about family." I scrolled through my spreadsheet, reading aloud in a soft, clear voice. October 5th. Don't be selfish, Alara. Family supports family. November 16th. Your brother needs our support right now. It's not about what's fair. December 1st. $50 late fee applied. I looked up. Does any of this sound familiar? That was different, my father insisted, his voice losing its bluster. "You're right," I agreed. "It was different. Because I was paying your mortgage while you lectured me about responsibility. I was funding Leo's hobbies while you told me to work harder." I gestured to the courier envelope they had brought with them, its contents now clutched in my father's hand. "It's all in there. 2 years of bank statements. 2 years of my pay stubs. 2 years of his App Store purchases charged to my account. Would you like to go through the math together? Leo took the envelope from my father, his hands shaking as he looked at the top pagina detailed summary I had created. What is all this? Everything, I said. Every dollar. Every lie. It's the truth you didn't want to see. My father lunged for the door, but the slim metal chain held firm. You had no right to document our lives. I had every right. My voice finally cracked, the years of suppressed pain welling up. You charged me more than fair market value to live in my own childhood bedroom. You used me as a line of credit without my consent. You pushed me until I almost broke, and you called it a lesson in love. My mother grabbed the papers from Leo. We were just trying to keep things together. To help you grow up. No, I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper. You were drowning, and you used me as a life raft. I stepped back from the door and returned a moment later with another document, sliding it through the small opening. It was a copy of the deed, showing North Star Holdings as the legal owner of their house. And now you get to learn how to swim. My father stumbled back, collapsing onto one of my porch chairs. The reality of it, cold and irrefutable, finally landed. You own our house. Technically, a legal entity in which I am the sole member owns the house, I corrected him. And that entity expects the mortgage to be paid or a rental agreement to be signed. On the 1st of each month. Market rate, of course. You can't do this to us, Leo said, his voice small. We're your family. Then start acting like it, I said, my gaze fixed on him. Get a job. Pay your own bills. Take some responsibility for your own life for once. Please, my mother whispered, her eyes pleading. We'll lose everything. Like I almost did? I countered. My savings, my social life, my passion for my art, my own sense of self-worth? What about everything I lost? My father stood up slowly, his face ashen. He looked like a much older man. What do you want, Alara? What will it take to end this? I want you to understand, I said, and I finally unlatched the chain, though I did not open the door further. Every receipt in that envelope is a choice you made. Every late fee is a consequence you created. Every lie you told yourselves is a debt that has now come due. They stood in silence on my porch, the evidence of their actions scattered around them. You have two options, I continued, my voice steady again. You can sign a rental agreement with North Star Holdings and pay the market rate on time every month. Or you have 30 days to vacate the property so I can sell it and recoup the funds you misappropriated from me for the last 2 years. The choice is yours. And me? Leo asked weakly, clutching his duffel bag as if it were the only solid thing in his world. I looked at my brother, really looked at the entitled boy who was finally being forced to become a man. The sofa is still available, I repeated. $9.50 a month. No excuses. No family discounts. My father bent down and began gathering the scattered papers with trembling hands. This isn't over, Alara. You're right, I agreed. For you, it's just the beginning of your adult responsibilities. I closed the door gently and locked it. I watched them walk back to their Carmy mother weeping, Leo looking utterly lost, and my father clutching the envelope of truth as if it might somehow, through sheer force of will, rewrite itself. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door and took a long, slow breath. The house was quiet. My house. My quiet. The victory didn't taste sweet, like revenge. It tasted like peace. Earned and paid for in full.